Hi guys, welcome back to the Do It Yourself YouTube channel. Today we've got a nice easy one for you. We're just going to show you how to plasterboard a stud wall. It's a really simple job, not many tools needed. If you're not already a subscriber to the channel, hit subscribe. There's loads of videos coming up on plumbing, construction, electrics, all kinds of different things, so there'll be something that'll help you out somewhere. So you don't need too many tools for this one. You're going to want a level, a saw, possibly a pad saw or jab saw, whatever you want to call it, but I don't use them. A Stanley knife with a good sharp blade in it, a pencil or two, you'll probably lose one of them if you're like me, tape measure, an impact driver, that's the quickest way to drive your screws into the plasterboard. You can get away with a drill, but it'll be a lot slower. You want a surf form, this is for filing down rough edges of plasterboard, really useful little tool. Possibly a laser level, I'll show you why in a little while. Then you'll want some drywall screws. I like to use 32mm. This is 12mm plasterboard, but if you're using anything bigger you can go up to a 40mm screw, and a ladder. First step, starting off on your first board, we want to get this first one squared up, and it needs to finish on a stud. You always need to make sure that you're screwing the plasterboard to a stud, so wherever a board finishes needs to be on a stud. You can't just finish a board here because there's nothing to screw onto, and then when the plasterer plasters it, it's just going to end up cracking. So we always want to finish on a stud. If we're plasterboarding a ceiling, we need to think the other way around, and it's going to be on a joist, so you'll finish your join on a joist. Yeah. So our first board here, 1200, doesn't meet the stud, so what we're going to do, we're going to cut this board, we're going to make it 825 so that it finishes on our stud here. This first board we're going to leave it at 2.4. We're not going to cut anything off the height at all. So we'll be using the full board, and we'll use a packer. Normally, as a general rule of thumb, your packer wants to be an off-cut piece of plasterboard that you're using. So in this case, a 12mm bit of plasterboard will be fine, and we can lay our board on that to give us a little bit of a gap at the bottom. Whenever your plasterer comes in, he's not going to want it to be touching the floor, because he won't plaster to the floor anyway, because it drags bits of dirt and stuff into the plaster. So we always leave a little gap along the bottom. Normally you'll cover that with your skirting board anyway, so it doesn't matter. Right, so we're going to cut our first board in now. We want this good edge on our stud here. So the rough edge that we cut, we'll end up with it into that wall there. First board we want at 825. I work in millimetres, otherwise it's 82.5 centimetres. If you work in inches, you're weird and I can't help you. So make a series of marks, unless you've got a big long straight edge that you can use. You'll see why in a minute, because we don't actually need to run a line all the way up it. Then grab your straight edge. A level, a good long level is perfect for the job. And then all we're going to do is actually cut it where it is. That makes it easier anyway, because we haven't got to mark it and then cut it. There's no point drawing a line in this case, unless we're doing some weird shapes. You don't need to draw lines. We can just mark it and use a knife. Hold your straight edge in place. Grab your knife, and you want a good deep cut all the way down. You want this to be a good cut, don't just score it, because you won't get the result, because we're going to end up snapping this over our knee. We need the line to be deep enough to actually allow the board to snap in the right place. Keep your knife handy in your back pocket. Pick your board up, break it over your knee, grab your knife, and if you notice we score the front of the board, because we're going to cut in at the back of the board. So run your knife along the back of the paper through the board. Lean it or get someone to help you hold it if you can't do it yourself. Like that, and that is the easiest way to cut a long length of plasterboard. I've got a helper today to help me hold the board and whatnot. So this is a surf form. So if you look on here, you've got these rough edges. Where we're joining plasterboard especially, it's important that we try and get these flat. So get your surf form and actually run it up the board, and you can see that that just helps to flatten it off. So do that along the edges before we put the board on the wall. So we're going to show you the hanging stage on a full board, just because it's easier for your benefit to show you how to screw it in. This garage door was in the way on the first one, so we're going to carry on this way. On your second board, you want to be button up tight to that joint, and you need to catch the stud, or if you're on the ceiling, catch the joist. So we'll butt that up, and then we'll show you how to screw the board in place. Now before you put the board in place, it's important that you mark where the studs are. This board is going to finish halfway on this stud here. We'll mark all these studs, because once the board is up there, you're not going to be able to tell where these studs are. That's going to be really difficult for you. Also, before you start screwing the board up, make sure there's no cables or anything that you're going to be putting a screw through, especially if somebody runs a cable down for a socket. It could be in the middle of one of the studs, and if you go putting a screw through it, you could hit the cable. So mark out any cables and be careful of those before you start screwing. Before you lift your board in place, grab your pot of screws, just stick a couple in your pocket, because once you get that board there, especially on a ceiling, it's going to be heavy. So we want to have everything ready so we can get a couple of screws in it to hold it there. So get your screwdriver nearby and a few screws in your pocket. Right, we'll grab this board. We'll lift the board in place, lay it on your packers, especially if you're working on your own. Butt the board up to the existing board that you're working into. Grab your level and your pencil. Where you made a mark on the floor or on the ceiling, and draw a line all the way up your board. And that is a quick little tip on how to know where your stud runs, so that you can bang them screws up there really easily without trying to guess. Another way to do this is to use a laser level, but I find you tend to stand in the way of it on this job, so that can be a bit of a pain in the arse. However, for ceilings, that's probably easier to use a laser level. Grab them screws you had in your pocket earlier, and just get a couple of screws in there to hold it, and that'll stay there nicely whilst you put the rest of the screws in. So when we're screwing the board to our studs, we want to go about every 200, between every 200 and 300 mil. You want to have a screw. If you don't have a screw often enough, around every 200 mil, what you'll find is once the board is plastered, you'll risk it popping away from the wall. You find that when it's got all that weight on it, it can quite easily pop through the screw. If you're doing a lot of these, it's quite handy to go around and push a screw in every 200 mil, and then come along and just bang them in. When you're doing these screws, you want the screw head to be just underneath the surface of the board. Otherwise, when your plasterer comes along, that's going to be a nightmare for him, because all he's going to do is hit the screw heads. We want to be making sure we're using drywall screws, and we don't want to go in the board too far either. If I show you here on an example, if we go too far in the board, what will happen? It'll just pop through the plasterboard, and then again, that screw's ineffective, and any weight that goes on there will actually just pop the screw through the board. If this happens, because it can take a little bit of a knack to get this right, if this happens and you go through, just put another screw next to it. When we're doing the edge of the board, like I said earlier, we need to make sure we're catching the stud or joist that we're working into. Don't want to go too close to the edge, because what will happen is you'll actually blow the edge out. Right, little trick for you here. If you miss the stud, the screw will just spin, and you won't be able to get it out either. So put your nail behind it and work out with your nail behind it, and it'll come out. We have a normal wood saw. Blow it off. So if you've got a socket to go around, you can measure up from the bottom of where your board's going to be, which would be 40 centimetres. That there. So obviously we don't have a socket to go around, but I'm just showing you in case you do. In from the side of the board, 14 centimetres. So then you'd grab your board, you'd go in from the side of the board, 14 centimetres, and up 40 centimetres, which would put you there. You grab your wire, curl it up inside the back box. You can drill a little hole, and then you'll be able to see if you're in the right place, which you should be if you've done your measurements correctly. And then you can use a multi-tool to just cut that socket hole out. Right guys, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or it helped you out at all, smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Put your bell notifications on and you'll know when I upload a video. And I'll see you guys in the next one.